There's one thing that's certainly a fact right now. Homes have gotten way more expensive. So people have been turning to more affordable housing options, whether that be modular homes, tiny homes, yurts, shared housing options, apartments, all sorts of different things. But there are drawbacks to every single one of these options when you're looking for something more affordable. Today, we're going to be discussing all the alternative options and what those drawbacks really are. Because some of them you just don't even think about, especially when you're just desperate to find the most affordable home. So first, we're going to be talking about my favorite affordable housing option, and that is a manufactured home. Why is it my favorite? Because price per square foot is a heck of a lot cheaper than traditional home building. Usually they run between $76 to $100 per square foot. Now that does not include the land, and that's one of the drawbacks. When it comes to manufactured housing, when we're referring to what we call a mobile home or manufactured home, or some people call them trailers, they're usually put in a manufactured home park, and I'm sure some people call them trailer parks. But that land underneath them is rented in most cases, and they've had all sorts of problems over the years, especially recently with institutional investors buying up the properties, increasing the rent so high that people can't afford to live there anymore. They have to abandon the house that they've spent years in. Some of them have those houses paid off, but the rent for the land that they have been living there for years is so high they have to move out, and then they have to abandon their house. That is one of the biggest drawbacks. The other thing is if you are looking for a piece of land to put a manufactured home on, it can be super difficult. Now, I will give you a little good news when it comes to this. There has been some legislation that's been put out there. The federal government is allowing for more areas to rezone it to allow for more manufactured housing. Not only that, they just came out with some new guidelines from FHA. I'm not a lender, but I talked to my good friend over at Win the House You Love, Kyle Seagraves, and he said that these are good changes, and it will allow for more people to be able to afford a manufactured home with good quality FHA loans. So that isn't a drawback. That's a plus. That's a bonus, thank goodness. But in a lot of areas, it is still very difficult to find a piece of land that you can put a manufactured home on. Even in my own area, which is a small little town, you have to have an acre of land before you put a manufactured home on it. And in other areas, they'll say you can have a manufactured home, but it has to be brand spanking new. It cannot be one that has been moved into that location from somewhere else. It can't be an older one. And not only that, manufactured homes, as you know, have a stigma against them. Neighbors don't really like them. They always complain about people that have them. They say it brings down the value of their home because there's a manufactured home close to it. You're just going to have to deal with those kinds of things. But in the economy that we live in now, who cares if your neighbors hate your house? At least you have an affordable place to live. Another con I do want to mention, because it does come up a lot in my videos, is people talk about the depreciation value of manufactured homes. Now, if you are planning on putting your manufactured home in a manufactured home park, you will not get the same kind of value and increase in equity as you would with a traditional stick-built home or a manufactured home that's on its own piece of land. Because that land is rented underneath it, price per square foot is not going to go up as high as it would in the latter case if it was on a piece of land that you owned. But that doesn't mean that it's absolutely worthless 10 years down the road. There are many manufactured home parks that you could buy resold manufactured home, and you would still have to pay more than they bought it for 10 years earlier. It just means that you won't gain as much value as you would with the other way around. But I will say this, manufactured homes built today are built better than they've ever been built before. And they've come up with some new regulations to even make them more safe. And I know that a lot of people like to call them tornado magnets, but that's not the case. If you look at older manufactured homes, the strapping systems weren't nearly as good as they are today. They are improving them more and more. And down the pipeline, you're going to see that they're going to become easier to get them in locations that you couldn't get them before. So there are some pros and cons that are in the pipeline for manufactured homes. So now let's talk about tiny homes. Tiny homes are strange, I'm not going to lie, because you have so many different versions of a tiny home. Some people refer to a tiny home as an ADU, which is an accessory dwelling unit. That's built to specific building codes and regulations in that area. Other people call a tiny home something that's on wheels that they can travel down the road. That is built usually to RV specifications. Some people call a shed that's been converted into a home a tiny home. That is built to no building specifications unless they got it certified by the local area that the permitting office went ahead and certified it to be livable. The thing about tiny homes is that you never know what you're buying unless you really do a deep investigation. So if you plan on getting a tiny home with wheels, I will tell you this, make sure it has RV specification, because if you take it to certain places like national parks, they're going to ask you for that certificate that says that it's RV certified, built correctly. It's imperative or they won't even let you into the park. Another thing too is if you're planning on living in a certain area, they will not allow you to live in that park for more than 6 months. They only have short-term leases. Another thing too, if you're doing this, just know that the ones that are certified RV, they specifically say they're not meant for long-term living use. Now, I've seen all over the internet all sorts of tiny home companies that have popped up like popcorn, and there is a boatload of scams out there. And people are very desperate at these times when they're trying to find the most affordable housing option. And when it comes to tiny homes, it's easy to get scammed. There's all sorts of Instagram accounts. There's even a guy on YouTube here that is selling his tiny homes who's got himself in huge hot water. It's called Holy Ground Tiny Homes if you want to look them up. You can even look them up on Google. But that's just one example of one person doing this kind of scam when there's thousands of them across the country. When you're looking at tiny homes, make sure you can visit the place that they're actually constructing those tiny homes. The second thing too is to start doing your own investigation online to find out if there's any other reviews for that specific company, if there's any Facebook pages that you could talk about that company. The tiny home community is very small and very tight, and it won't take long if a bad builder's out there to get the word out. So if you start asking questions about a specific builder, if the people in the tiny home community say it's a bad dude, it's a bad dude. Like I said, it's a tight community and they're always willing to help each other out. It's a good community to get a part of because just like you, they were trying to find the most affordable housing option for them. Another thing about tiny homes, I just saw on TikTok recently, there was a guy who had a whole setup of his tiny home and a tornado did hit his tiny home. It ruined everything. He put his whole savings into this new way of life where he didn't have to depend on water, he didn't have to depend on electricity, and he had his little tiny home, and the tornado took away pretty much everything. So that total cost is everything he had put into it for the last 2-3 years is completely gone, and now he has to start all over again. Even though this is a more affordable way of life, if you don't have any kind of proper insurance, that can be a problem. And to get insurance on a tiny home, first of all, is very expensive. Secondly, if you can even find it. I love me a tiny home, and the ones that have been put together, some of them are absolutely adorable and very functional, but be very careful when you're deciding on any kind of tiny home that you want to live in. Now, the ADU, the auxiliary dwelling units, those are homes that they're put behind your house. Usually they're built to the standard traditional building code, or they're built to universal building code, which is a little bit higher than your traditional building code. Those are highly regulated. And if you're planning on putting them in your backyard, there is a permitting process, and it does take more time than, let's just say, rolling a tiny home in your backyard. Of course, you're going to have to get approval from your HOA. There are grants out there if you're doing this for like a rental in an area that's highly populated. California is known for this. Maine has actually loosened the guidelines when it comes to tiny homes, allowing for more people to live in Maine with their tiny home. So just know that when you're looking at ADU, it's going to be a lot different than like a traditional tiny home that's on wheels. Now let's talk about modular homes. Okay, so this is when people get it super confused. The only downside to a modular home is that people get modular homes and manufactured homes mixed up. Both of those homes are made in a manufactured plant, but they're built to totally different building codes. A manufactured home is built to HUD specifications. Those are government specifications. When you deal with a modular home, they're built to universal building code in some cases, but they're built much higher standards than even a lot of traditional built housing. That's a plus. Except for the fact that now modular housing used to be less expensive than traditional home building per square foot. Today, that is not the case. In most cases, it's going to be the same amount as it would for a traditional built home. So you're probably saying to yourself, why would I even go modular then? Well, let me just put it this way. It's built to better specifications. It's going to be a stronger, more durable home. Secondly of all, it's built much quicker, much faster than a traditional built home. Thirdly of all, the energy efficiency with modular homes is a lot higher than it is with a traditional built home. And one more thing, just to let you know, this is going to be a negative. Your property taxes are going to be the same as they would for a traditional built house as they would for a modular house. It's going to be no different. For some people, that's a plus, but for a lot of us that don't really want to pay a lot more for taxes, Yikes, fruit stripes. I personally love modular homes because they can be built faster. I do believe that they are a solution to the affordability crisis in the United States because they can be built so quickly. And if more people got on board, we could get more houses popped up. We need about 5 million of them. And to have a house that's built better than traditional home standards that can be put in within 3 weeks and have a family in there with an owner's occupant certificate, I think that's the way to go. But I don't make the rules. It can be done, but I don't make the rules, you know. You know how that works. You know what's old always becomes new again? Have you heard of shared housing before? It's very simple. Someone owns a house and they're going to go ahead and rent out little rooms inside that house. And everyone else shares the expenses when it comes to electricity, water, cable, that kind of thing. I don't know about you, but people that you don't know can be a real hassle. So if you had 3 or 4 people that were just renting out rooms and one person drains out the whole hot water heater and the other person stays up all night playing music or video games super loudly, that can be a real hassle. Even though the expense may be a lot cheaper, especially since home prices and rent prices have gone up exponentially, I can't imagine wanting to do that. But I'm 50 years old. I can understand if you're a younger person. Another drawback to doing something like this is that a lot of HOAs are not going to allow you to rent out rooms inside your house. And you're going to say, well, how could they find out? Well, if you have 5 cars parked in your driveway or along the road and they're all going into your house, some nosy neighbor is definitely going to throw you under the bus. If you're thinking about doing this, make sure that you're okay with your HOA. Another thing too, there might be a city ordinance that doesn't allow for you to do something like this. You don't want to get ticketed and you don't want to have to go to court because you're just trying to save a few bucks on your mortgage payments. I know it's a lot more than a few bucks, but to go to jail for it doesn't seem really worth it. Not really. Another thing about that too is that it is causing wear and tear on your house. You have now 4 more people that are opening and shutting the door. You have 4 more people that are running all of your electricity, your air conditioning. You have 4 more people that are running the hot water heater. All this excessive use is going to cause more wear and tear. It's going to cause things to break down a lot quicker. These are all things you need to consider if you were actually on the fence of sharing your house out with a group of people. Not only that, like, I don't know if you've ever even worked in an office before. Nothing made me more angry than the people that would eat my food. And you can only imagine that if you're sharing all these things, there's someone's going to eat your food and drink your last Coke. That's going to be the worst, the day that you really wanted it to. Now let's talk about one affordable housing option that I hear all the time in my comment section. And that is about, well, I'm just going to go ahead and buy a piece of land somewhere and then no one can find me and I'll build whatever I want. I assure you, with every fiber of my being, someone will always find out. Even if you're in the middle of Nowhereville, they have satellite images from the tax assessor's office to know exactly where the meets and bounds are. And even in my little small town, they send drones up and they know if you have added anything to your property. For instance, if you were to dig an in-ground swimming pool and not have it permitted, when the tax assessor's drone goes up, they know that you've added an in-ground pool and they will adjust your taxes. And this is more common than it's ever been. You cannot just pick up and move to the mountains somewhere and think that you won't be found. You can't just start building a house in the middle of nowhere and think you can't be found. Even in the wilderness of Alaska, people always get caught. And I hate for anybody to spend their good time-earned money into building something that only to have it torn down or told that you have to leave. All right, so you're saying, well, I bought a piece of land. I'm going to go do what I want to do on that piece of land. Nope, you can't do that either. Again, there's always going to be regulations on what you can do on a piece of land, whether that's by the county, the city, the state. Going to dictate exactly what you can and cannot build on that piece of property. They may tell you that you have to have a structure at least over 600 square feet. They won't allow for a tiny home, or they'll say that you have to have a structure that's dedicated to a foundation or a basement and that you can't have it on wheels. They may say you can't have a manufactured home. There's going to be something in the bylaws or in the courthouse filed restrictions that tells you what you can and can't do with a piece of property. Totally stinks. I know. I didn't even realize how intense that it could be until I started getting into real estate. And there's all sorts of weird stuff that you don't know about, like air rights. Like you can't build a structure so high because it invades certain airspace. There's water rights too. Not only that, when it comes to like, you have to have a survey too if you're going to build a structure. And they're going to tell you exactly where you can and can't have that house and how close it can be to the road. Even though it's your land, you can't do what you want with it. Stinks. The government's got to get their little tangly hands into everything. They're going to dictate exactly what you're going to do with it. Now, I will tell you there are other ways you can find affordable housing options. And it doesn't necessarily have to be anything that I mentioned here. You can even look at foreclosures because there are foreclosures out there. Just know that a lot of them that are going to be the most affordable are going to require you to do a lot more elbow grease, and they may not qualify for the loans that you have been approved for. So just be cautious of that when you're looking for a foreclosure. It is a place that you can find more affordable houses. So just look into it because it is something that you should consider. Some people out there will try to talk you out of foreclosures because they'll tell you nightmare stories, but I've seen many people buy them and they've been just fine. I mean, why would institutional investors buy as many as they can? They're totally worth it. So look, if I haven't mentioned an affordable housing option that you wanted me to talk about today, and there's some pitfalls that people should know, please put it in the comment section below because we're here to help each other out. We're a community. To watch more detailed videos about affordable housing options like modular homes, manufactured homes, or even tiny homes, go ahead and watch these videos right here. My name is Kristina Smallhorn, your real estate whisperer, and I tell you all this because good real estate information matters.